So I remember, in the MTC, I was there for 9 weeks, learning Spanish, and after 9 weeks, you think that you learn a lot of Spanish, and you do, which is great. But I remember being on the airplane headed to Bogota for the first time, and I was pretty confident that I knew Spanish. In those 9 weeks, I was like, oh yeah, all the other missionaries, I knew more than them, and the new missionaries coming in, seeing how much they didn't know, I was just like, oh, I totally have this. Like, I felt really confident. I remember getting on the airplane and just full of the missionary spirit, I try and start talking to the guy that's sitting on my left about the church, and he's from Colombia, so he doesn't speak English, and so I start to try and ask him in Spanish, where he's from and about his family, and the responses that I was getting, it wasn't Spanish. He was speaking perfect Spanish to me, but I was just like, what is this language? Like, this isn't the same language they taught me in the MTC. So it was funny just feeling confident about it and then getting to the mission field and realizing, holy cow, these people talk so fast that, oh man, this is going to be tough. So I remember getting to the airport in Bogota. I remember leaving the airport and seeing the streets of Colombia for the first time. And the first thing that I noticed were all these little taxis just zipping around. There's these tiny yellow taxis just flying around everywhere. And I was just like, man. And I just remember looking around and being the tallest guy that I could see. Everyone else was at least a head shorter than me. I'm 6'3" or 6'2", and everyone else was just ridiculously shorter than me. And so I was instantly the tallest guy in the country, probably, and all these little taxis were zipping around. And then I noticed a bunch of armed guards with machine guns just standing everywhere in the streets. And I just remember thinking, what am I getting myself into? But it was great. I learned to adapt, and I started, seeing all these funny things about Colombia, how they didn't have milk that came in cartons. They had milk in little plastic bags, and you didn't have to refrigerate them. And just how the food that they ate had a lot of rice, a lot of beans, a lot of chicken and beef and soup, and so it was an awesome change. But I feel that after the first few weeks and first months, I started to catch on a little bit more to the Spanish, and the taxis didn't seem as weird. But Bogota and Colombia in general is known for being really dangerous and is known for drugs. And those were basically the two things that people were telling me before my mission, was that, hey, when you get to Colombia, beware because it's dangerous and there's lots of drugs. And okay, just as anywhere in the world, there are dangerous places, but Colombia is nowhere near as dangerous as what people tell you. There are dangerous things, and you need to be careful, of course, and keep the rules and don't stay out too late. But I didn't see any drugs as much as they would say that I would, and it was really not as dangerous as I would think it would be. So the Bogota North Mission, it's about an 18-hour bus ride from one end of it to the other. So it starts in Bogota, and then you drive all the way up. You pass a city called Bucaramanga, and you keep driving north, and then you get to another city, which is the limit, called Cucuta. And that is a city that is right on the border of Venezuela. And so serving in that city, half of the city is basically Venezuelan people, and you kind of get to experience a completely different culture there too, so that was great. But yeah, an 18-hour bus ride. So there's not very members there, but I would say Colombia is dominantly Catholic. Everybody's Catholic, and that's just how they were raised, and it's a tradition in their family. But there are a lot of other different churches around there too. You get to experience pretty much every church that's out there. The Pentecostal church, the Jehovah's Witnesses, Seventh-day Adventists. You get to know a lot of different churches out there. So the typical ward size that I had on my mission was about 100 to 200 people that attended, and in my last branch, there was probably 50 people. And so it was just interesting because I remember this was when there was kind of the spike of missionaries. And I remember in my very last area, we were in a small branch of about 50 people, and we had 6 missionaries serving in our branch, which was funny because just the missionaries, was a big attendance of just the branch. And sometimes when we would all bring investigators, the missionaries and their investigators would be about just as many people as were attending the branch that were members. So it would, usually when you're in the city, you would have, bigger wards, but once you get into the smaller little towns, then you start to get into branches, and there's not very many members there at all. So I served in the Bogota, Colombia North Mission, and I served from February of 2012 to February of 2014. I served in Bogota, the city, for about half of my mission. I also served in the town of Bucaramanga, and I served in Cucuta. So in those cities, I served in a few different areas in each of those cities. So Bogota is a huge city. It is massive. There are tons of people that live there, and it's pretty high up in the mountains. And so it's interesting because when I thought that I was going to South America, my mission, I thought I was going to be hot the whole time and just hot and sweaty, but Bogota is not like that at all. Since Bogota is such high altitude, it actually gets really cold there. It never snows, but it is always pretty chilly. And most of the houses that you live in, they don't have heat, they don't have air conditioning. And so I would say that the average temperature would be about 50 to 60, sometimes 70s or 80s when it gets hot in the day. But it's kind of a chilly, mild climate. It would rain a lot. So you would I would say probably the hottest day in Utah is about one of the hottest days in Bogota. And then you'd get really cold days. And nights were always kind of interesting because, you didn't have any heaters, and so you just kind of have to bundle up a little bit. But Bogota it's a beautiful city. There's a lot of stray dogs everywhere, but depending on where you are, sometimes, I remember in one of my areas, there was this a little town on the side of a mountain, and it was just beautiful. They had, all their houses were painted bright different colors, and there was... in that particular part, that little town was actually really dangerous, though. And in our ward, they told us that we could not go there past, 6 or 7 at night, just because they had a lot of gangs, a lot of violence. And we didn't know this until probably about halfway through that transfer that I was in there. And so we would actually go there quite a few times, I guess in the times when we weren't supposed to. And, we didn't see any gang fights or anything, but we would hear stories of where they would just be living there, and our ward mission leader lived up there, but he said that sometimes he would just hear gunshots, and he would just tell his family to get away from the windows, and, they got kind of used to it, but he was telling me that the police don't even go up there because there's just so much gang activity, and the police are scared of them. So there are a lot of dangerous places in Bogota, and if you're going there, you need to make sure that, don't hold your camera out in the open where people can see it. People will rob you in the middle of the day. There's a lot of different techniques that I've learned that people use to rob people. There's this one story that I heard of people who they would sell a brand new iPhone on the streets for really, really cheap. And, you go up and you'd buy the iPhone, and you couldn't believe how cheap it was, and so you'd buy it. And then they knew that all of the customers that bought the iPhone would continue down this path, and they'd walk under a bridge. There under the bridge, that same company, I guess, would have other people there to rob the person who had the iPhone. So they would rob the phone back and then continue to sell it. So they would just have all these different clever ways of robbing people. And, they're smart. They're really smart at it. So you just have to be really careful. They can easily get your credit card information or other ways by pretending that they're the police or pretending to be all these things. So you just have to use common sense. Be wise. Don't be out late at night. Don't be walking the street by yourself, and you'll be fine. But Bogota really is a beautiful city, and they have tons of street vendors where they sell delicious food, arepas and empanadas and buñuelos. They're just... If you're going there, you have to try those because they're just delicious. And they're really cheap. You can buy any of the things that I just said for less than $1, and they're amazing, and I miss them a lot. So in Bogota, the usual way of transportation is you either walk somewhere or you ride a bus. They have a train, I guess, a metro called the Transmilenio that you can take, and it takes you to different parts of the city. But other than that, you either have to, if you're going somewhere far, you either have to take a taxi or take a bus or take the Transmilenio. People in Colombia, they're so poor that you really can't afford a car unless you're really, really well off. And that's just something that I've noticed that, they ask about us in America, and, they say, does your family have a car? And it's really a humbling experience to say, oh, my family actually owns 3 or 4 cars. That is unheard of there because they're so poor. And so to get to a place, you have to know where the buses come, and the bus drivers are pretty crazy. The taxis are pretty crazy. It's a pretty crazy place. when you're on the bus, if all the seats are taken, you have to stand up, and sometimes the bus will be weaving in and out of traffic, and it'll kind of throw you side to side, and so it's pretty crazy. And sometimes on the Transmilenio, people will be rushing in and out, and you have to really hold on to your possessions, because a lot of crime happens in that. Well, people will just pickpocket you, or they'll take something, or they'll bump into you, and you'll find out that they took your watch, and so you just have to be careful. But yeah, getting around it's kind of hard. I've heard that in Europe the transportation there is really simple and quick and fast and easy, but in South America they're still trying to get it down, and so it does take a while to get places. So the second area I was in, it was called Bucaramanga, and this city is beautiful. I mean, the temperature is perfect. You walk in and there's pine trees, not pine trees, no. Okay, let me start over. What is that called? Not pine trees. Palm trees. Okay, I'm going to start over. So the second city that I served in was called Bucaramanga, and let me tell you, this city is just beautiful. The temperature is perfect. There's palm trees all around. It's gorgeous. It's still kind of high up in the mountains like Bogota, but it's not as high, and so it's not as cold there. In Bucaramanga, you can get pretty hot there. The temperature ranges anywhere from about, I would say, mid-70s to up into the 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it does get kind of hot during the day. It's a little bit more humid, but it is beautiful there. It's still a pretty big city, but not nearly like Bogota, and it's just beautiful. It's green, and the people there are so warm and so friendly. The people in Bogota, I guess, are kind of more reserved and held back. You go up and try and talk to them, and they just be busy, work. They need to get to this place. In Bucaramanga, the people just warm right up to you. They're super open, and they love talking to you, and they're just really kind and friendly there. So it's just a beautiful city, and I think if I go back, that is the city that I'd want to go to. The third city that I was in is a little town. Well, it's a big city, but it's smaller than the other cities in Colombia. It's called Cucuta. And this city, it is right next to the border of Venezuela. And so I would say 90% of the things that they have in Cucuta, their produce and their groceries, and basically everything that is sold there comes from Venezuela because it's cheaper in Venezuela. So there are people, the whole industry of Cucuta is based off of Venezuela. And so there's constantly people going in and out of Venezuela to buy things in Venezuela for really, really cheap, come back to Cucuta and then sell it, and that's how they make their living. And it's just kind of interesting because since it's so close to Venezuela, there's a lot of Venezuelan culture in there. And it's really similar to the culture of Colombia, but it's just still interesting and unique getting to recognize that culture as well. Cucuta is really hot. It's not high up in the mountains, and so it gets hot at day, it's hot at night. There's really no air conditioning besides like in the church would be the only place where we'd have air conditioning. But other than that, we just have to rely on fans, or we just have to wait for a cold breeze to come, and it usually wouldn't. But as a missionary, we'd be walking around the streets of Cucuta all day, and by the end of the day, you were just hot and sweaty and tired. But it's beautiful. I wouldn't say it's very green there, but the people are very nice and very open. I would say it's pretty similar to Bucaramanga in the fact that you go there and the people want to know about you, and they'll talk to you and they'll laugh, and you'll be walking on the streets and they'll yell, "Hey, missionaries!" And there's a really friendly people there, and I think that people are really receptive and open to anything, to talking and to be friends and to learn about the gospel. And so it's great there. So the Colombian culture is a lot different from American culture. The people there, to start off, are really humble. A lot of them, they make probably a good person to make about $15 a day, and it's not very much. And so they're a really humble people, but they're a really happy people. And that's just something that I learned while I was serving there, is that you don't have to be rich to be happy. You can be happy in any circumstance that you're in. And so I loved seeing, the people, and a lot of the common jobs there would be taxi drivers or bus drivers. And it's interesting because when you're driving along in a taxi or a bus, they will have people there in the streets that, trying to make money, they will either perform for you when you're stopped at a stoplight. It's like you'll stop at a stoplight and then someone will come out into the middle of the crosswalk and they'll start juggling chainsaws or fire or whatever, or they'll go car to car with a windshield washer and some liquid, some fluid, and they'll spray your windshield and they'll start washing it off. and then they'll, go by your car and ask for money. Or some people will sell flowers. Colombia is known for having flowers. I would say a lot of the flowers that you buy in your local grocery or store are from Colombia, because they grow a ton of flowers there. So you'll see people selling flowers on the streets, or just selling whatever thing you can find on the streets there when you're just stopped at a stoplight. So I found that was really interesting and really entertaining as well, because they would have a lot of super talented people. You're stopped at a stoplight and you'll see people jumping on each other's shoulders, and you'll see someone, another interesting thing is that you would see someone just frozen on the street, dressed up like a transformer or dressed up like a statue. And then if you walk by and if you drop a coin into the little box out in front of it, then they'll do some kind of animation or some kind of fun thing, some kind of interaction with you. And so I thought that was interesting, that people will literally do anything to be able to provide for their families there. Even if it's in the middle of the heat of day, they will be out there working in the streets trying to get money for their families. Another thing about the Colombian culture that was different, that kind of surprised me, was that when you are in a car and you're closing the car door, you need to make sure you close it soft. Because, here in America, you get out of the car and you shut the door and it's fine, and you can shut it hard and it doesn't matter. But in Colombia, if you close the door harder than, closing it softly, those people will get at you for it. And it will be scary. If you close the door harder than you're supposed to, you'll get yelled at, saying like, "What are you doing, trying to break my car?" I assumed the doors were meant to be closed hard, but I guess you just have to be really careful about closing doors in Colombia. Another thing about the culture is that people just love telling you about their Colombia. They love their culture. They love their heritage. They love their traditional Colombian dress. And wherever you go, you'll listen to the traditional Colombian music, which is vallenato. And it's a music that has accordions, and it's kind of a happy dance music, but they will just blast this music from the streets wherever you're at. And, some people in Colombia, they will have a bigger sound system than their house. That's all they care about. They care about their music and their dancing. And it's just interesting because whatever kind of party you go to in Colombia, whether it's a birthday party or a ward party or any kind of party, they just dance. And they are just a happy dancing people. And you'll go there, and it's funny because people would ask me all the time, they'd be like, "So do you guys dance in America?" And I'd be like, "Well, yeah, we dance a little bit." And they would say, "Cool, great." But it was nothing like how they danced. With the girls, their hips would be swinging, and the guys, their posture would just be super elegant, and they would just do all these crazy things. And it's just something that I really appreciate about their culture, is that they've just really cherished that culture of dancing and their dress and the music that they listen to. And so that's something that I love about the Colombian culture. So Colombia has some of the best food that I've ever had in my life. Before my mission, they kept telling me, "Hey, on your mission, you're going to have rice and beans every day." And I was kind of dreading it because I was thinking, man, rice and beans, that just doesn't sound great. But I didn't realize that I was used to American rice and American beans, and there is a complete difference from the rice and beans we have here than what they have there. And let me just tell you that the Colombian rice is amazing. It is delicious. It is not just plain white rice that we make in a rice cooker here in America. It is amazing. In Colombia, how they cook it is they first they turn on the stove and the pot, and then they pour in some oil, and they start to brown the rice first without adding any water. Then they chop up some onions, they chop up some garlic, they put it in, and they brown all that up with the oil. And then once that's all kind of brown, then they add some water, and then they just let it sit. And so it cooks. And it's interesting because in America, I feel that when we cook rice, sometimes we stir it and we kind of get it all, it just seems kind of mushy and kind of flavorless and without salt or anything. But in Colombia, they do all that. They add the salt, they add chopped onion and chopped garlic, and then they just let it sit. And it's interesting because it cooks beautifully and it tastes amazing, but not stirring the rice, there's advantages and disadvantages. The advantages is that the rice doesn't get broken up into little pieces. You still get full grains of rice, and it's delicious. But the disadvantage is that when they just let it cook in a pot, the bottoms and the edges of the pot get like the hard black kind of crispier rice. And so you have to really clean your pots well after you cook rice, but it's totally worth it. and I'm never going to stir rice again, just because having those full grains of rice is beautiful and it's delicious. So the rice in Colombia, it's amazing. But aside from that, they also have these, Colombia is known for their arepas. And this is, I guess, the only thing I can compare it to is like a pancake. But instead of being made out of flour, it's made out of corn. So they get this little pancake-looking thing, and sometimes they'll fry it on the stove, and then they'll cut it open and they'll fill it with cheese, they'll fill it with meat, and then they'll put this nice little sauce over it that's just amazing. And they'll sell these on the streets for less than $1. And I guess you could say that it's, they have it for dinner all the time, and that you can buy it in the street, so it's even not fast food, but it's amazing and delicious. It doesn't taste like a pancake. I know you're thinking like a pancake filled with cheese. That may be kind of weird, but it's nothing like that. But it's amazingly delicious. They also have empanadas, which are pretty common in the Latin culture, but these empanadas in Colombia, they're filled with rice and chicken or rice and beef, and they are to die for, and I could pay a lot of money to have one of those right now because they're so good. They also have these things called buñuelos, and the best way to describe it is they get some dough and they mix the dough. It's about half dough and half shredded cheese, and they make these little balls of it, and then they fry these balls in oil, and then once they're fried, they take them out and you eat it, and it's just this. I mean, I guess it could taste kind of like mozzarella sticks, but in a ball, and not, I mean, the dough and the cheese is all mixed together. So I don't know how else to explain it, but it is amazing, and I love it so much. But the typical food other than that in Colombia is they just have lots of soup. There are two most famous soups that I love the most. One of them is called ajiaco, and that has chicken, and they put sweetened condensed milk in it. And it's to die for. They put potatoes in it. And another one is called sancocho, and they usually make that with hen and with potatoes and other vegetables, and it's super delicious. So Colombian food it's amazing. It's so delicious. I would say one of the best things about Colombian food is the bakeries. When you are walking down the street, it seems that every other block or so, there's a bakery where they just deliver fresh bread at any moment throughout the day, and you can buy, just a little roll, or you can buy loaves, or you can buy however much you want. And they have so many different unique types of bread. Some of it is sweet, some of it is salty. My favorite kind of bread, it was really interesting. It's a bread that they fill it with cheese and with this thing called arequipe, which I guess is also known as it's like a caramel kind of sauce thing, but it's bread filled with cheese and caramel. And it sounds kind of like a weird combination, but it's amazing. It's delicious. Another weird thing that they do in Colombia that may sound weird, but it actually tastes really good, is they put cubes of cheese in their hot chocolate. And, that may sound weird to us as Americans, but let me just kind of explain. In Colombia, their cheese isn't very flavored. It's not as salty and not as flavorful as the cheese here in America. So what they do is when they add the cheese to the hot chocolate, you first drink it, and then you have the cube of cheese left over. And it's kind of weird, but the hot chocolate kind of puts flavor into the cheese. Not chocolatey flavor, but cheese flavor. And so it just gives the cheese more flavor. And it's delicious, and it's amazing, and I love it. So one day on a P-Day in Cucuta, this was in my last area, we were trying to figure out what to do for P-Day because, as a missionary, there's a lot of things you're not allowed to do. So we were asking around, and one of the members in our little branch there told us, "Hey, elders, there's a zoo here in Cucuta that you guys should go see." And we were like, "Nah, there's no way. Like, this town is too small that there can't be a zoo here." And he's like, "No, there is. I'll take you. Let's go." And so we're like, "Sweet." So we hop on a bus, and he takes us to this little town, I guess. And he takes us to this house. It's kind of like a farm, and he knocks on the door, and this lady answers, and we're like, "Hey, we're here to come see the zoo." And it turned out to be more of like a big farm, but they did have a lot of zoo animals. They had a monkey, they had turtles and birds and horses and all these exotic and unique animals. And so she opened the door and saw that we were foreigners, and she's like, "Oh, well, to be honest, we're only open on Sundays. But, I see that you guys are foreigners, so if you want, you can pay the fee and you can come on in, and we'll let you take a look around." And we're like, "Sweet," as a missionary, if you're going to a zoo, that's an awesome day. So we start to go in, but then she's like, "Hold on, I just need to warn you guys, just be careful in there because, since we're not open today, we're cleaning some of the animals' cages, and we're cleaning the monkey's cage right now, and so he's off running around, playing around, and just be careful because he's angry. And I was like, what? Okay, that didn't really register to me because I've never thought of monkeys as being angry. You know, I always thought monkeys as cute and cuddly and nice, and so I kind of didn't really pay attention to that advice. I was like, yeah, whatever. So she's just like, but just be careful. And we're like, okay. She's like, he's over playing on the other side of the farm, so if you guys kind of stay over here, you'll be okay. And we're like, great. So I didn't really think about it that much. We walk in, and we start taking pictures of all the cool birds, the horses and the turtles and the birds, and we're taking pictures of this really cool exotic looking bird when all of a sudden I hear this pitter patter of feet run up behind me, and the next thing I know is I feel this searing pain in my leg, and I look down and I see that a monkey is just attached to my leg. Its fangs are just embedded in my leg, and it hurts so bad. So I kick it off and I start screaming, and I look down and I see these 2 fang marks in my leg, and I look over and I see that this monkey is just crazy. This guy, he's jumping up and down, baring his teeth. He starts to attack my companion, and he's like scratching at his legs. And so we're like, what is going on here? This came out of nowhere, latched itself onto my leg, and now it's trying to kill us. So we run back to the lady's house, screaming and yelling along the way. We look back over our shoulder. We see that the monkey is coming after us, and he's booking it. And so we're like picking up stones and sticks and throwing them behind us as we're going to try and hit it, because this thing is out for blood. And so we get back to the lady's house, and we're yelling for her to come out. She comes out. She hears all the commotion. She's like, what's going on? And I point at my leg, and I was like, the monkey just bit me. And she's like, oh, well, that's not good. Obviously. So we're just like, what do we do? She's like, let me grab some ointment. And so the monkey, once the monkey sees her, kind of backs off a little bit, and he's kind of circling around us, and he doesn't attack just yet. And so she comes out with this ointment and puts it on my leg, and there's this bubbling and fizzing and the pain and everything. But the monkey he's still there eyeing us, and we're just like, we don't feel safe here, we should probably leave. So we leave from the zoo. And I call up my mission president or my mission president's wife, because she's in charge of all the health of the missionaries. I call her up and say, hey, I just get bit by a monkey. What do I do? And she's like, I don't know what to do. That doesn't happen every day. So she calls up the mission doctor and tells him what happened. And he's like, I don't know what to do. So he went and started researching all this stuff. And then he called us back and he was like, Elder, we need to get you to a hospital, because if that monkey has rabies, and if it bit you, and if you get rabies, you're going to die. And I was like, oh my goodness. So we rush to the hospital, and this nurse comes out, and I mean, okay, Colombia is known for its beautiful women, okay? Shakira, she's from Colombia, if that tells you anything. But this nurse comes out, and she's like, okay, well, we'll help you now. So me and my companion stand up, and she's like, no, just you. And I was like, wait, what? So she has my companion sit down, and I just go with her, which is like tearing my soul apart. You never leave your companion. She takes me into this little room, and she starts asking, so what happened to you? And I was like, well, I got bit by a monkey. And this nurse just kind of starts flirting with me. She realizes that I'm a North American, and I'm away from my companion, just got bit by a monkey, and now this nurse is trying to get with me. And I'm just like, oh my goodness. And so she starts asking me, to speak in English. And she's like, how do you say nurse in English? And so I tell her, and then she's like, how do you say beautiful nurse in English? I can't tell you which was worse, getting bit by the monkey or getting hit on by this Colombian nurse. It was terrible. But 7 rabies shots later, I'm walking out of the hospital, and I just can't think that life can get any worse. When all of a sudden, I get a call from the lady who owns the farm, and she says, Elders, we have a problem. Once that monkey bit you, it just went berserk. It went ballistic. It jumped over the fence, and we've been getting calls all day that the monkey has been terrorizing little kids playing in the streets. So here we are. I just get bit by a monkey, get 7 rabies shots, and I get a call finding out that the monkey is out terrorizing little kids. So for the next couple of days, I just couldn't focus very much. Whenever we were walking out in the streets, I was always looking behind my shoulder, looking over my shoulder, trying to see if the monkey was following us, because I felt like it was. I felt like something was watching me, and I couldn't sleep at night, and it was just such a scary experience. I was hoping that something would come out of it to where I would, get some superpower, maybe turn into Monkey Man, but, that never happened. That would be cool to be missionary by day and monkey vigilante by night, but unfortunately it didn't happen like that. But eventually, we got a call from the lady saying that they had finally captured the monkey. It was back in its cage, everything was good, so I decided to pay that monkey a little visit and just kind of chat our feelings out. So the next P-Day we went and the monkey was in its cage, and as we were walking up to it, once it saw me, it just starts jumping up and down and rattling the cage, and I'm just like, oh boy, oh boy. But I sit down next to it and we just have this nice little chat. This is a little discussion about how we have our differences, but it's okay. And by the end of it, we became good friends. I think everything turned out well after that. But, lots of missionaries can say that they got chased down by dogs or bit by dogs, but I felt that it was a good story to say that on my mission I got bit by a monkey. So one Saturday we had a baptism and scheduled for our church for an investigator we were teaching, and we went to the church that Saturday to fill up the baptismal font for their baptism. And I remember we got to the church and we had the keys, so we opened the doors and we were able to get into the church, but we realized that we didn't have a key in order to get to the baptism font and open up the door to the font to start filling it up. And we had gotten there a couple hours early because it took a couple hours for the font to fill up, but without the key to open that door, we couldn't get in and we couldn't start filling up the font. And so we were stuck there in that dilemma of, oh no, we have a baptism, but we can't get into the font. What do we do? So we start calling all of our ward members who we think would have keys, and none of them are able to come by the church to give us the keys. And so we're just stuck. We have a baptism coming up soon, and we're not able to fill up the font, so it looks like it can't happen. And that was just a really discouraging thing to think about. And so we just kept telling ourselves, no, we have to make this happen. And so I started thinking about faith and how faith precedes the miracle. And, I was thinking this is a moment where we need a miracle. And so we need to show some faith and see if we can get a miracle from this, and if we can get a baptism. So I remember just praying and asking God to inspire us to know what to do in order to receive a miracle. And the thought came to me, go around the church and fill up every bucket you can find with water. And I was just like, that's kind of interesting. So I was like, all right. So I told my companion, let's go around the church and let's just fill up every bucket we can find with water. And he was like, okay. So we go around and we start filling up every bucket that we can find with water. And I guess it could be kind of funny if you were looking from a distance, just seeing these two missionaries filling up all these buckets with water. But the interesting thing is that as soon as we had filled all of them up, and as soon as we were filling the last one up to the top with water, as soon as it got full, all of a sudden we heard this little jingle of keys from somewhere inside the church, and we looked at each other and we said, do you hear that? And so we ran through the church, and it turns out that there was a brother who just got there who was opening the financial office or something, but we asked him and he had a key to open up the font. And so that was just a really interesting experience in knowing that if we would have just sat there doing nothing, or if we would have just sat there even just praying, I don't know if God would have given us the miracle. But once we started going around acting in faith, filling up those buckets with water, God looked down at us and said, hey, they're showing their faith. They need a miracle. Boom. And so we were able to get the key, open up the font, and we were able to have a baptism that day. And it was a really beautiful experience, and it taught me a lot about faith. The Book of Mormon has been probably the greatest blessing that I've received in my life. I've received so much power and so much comfort from reading in its pages. It's honestly my most prized possession, and reading from it every day has helped me so much through daily struggles, daily temptations. The Book of Mormon has given me power over temptation. It has made my life a lot more peaceful and a lot more calm. I have realized a tangible difference in my life on the days that I don't read the Book of Mormon and the days that I do, in just the way that I feel, the happiness that I receive. I know that the Book of Mormon has a true power in it, and it has the power to bring people closer to Christ. I know that that book is inspired of God, and it's honestly the keystone of our religion. I know that Joseph Smith couldn't have made up a book as perfect as the Book of Mormon, and I testify of it, and I am willing to spend the rest of my life testifying of it, just because it's had such a great impact on me, and I would not be who I am today without it. And I would never be able to become the man who God wants me to become without reading from the Book of Mormon every day. So one time I got really sick on my mission towards the beginning of it, just because I was getting used to the change of culture and food and everything, and I remember getting so sick, and I remember praying to God saying, why am I so sick? Why can't you just heal me so I can go out and preach the gospel? And I think a couple weeks just passed by where I just wasn't getting better, and it was really frustrating. But I remember praying one time and saying, why aren't you healing me, and all of this, kind of complaining. And then this thought came to me that basically said, hey, I won't take you out of your affliction, but if you ask me, I will help you get through it. And so that just really made me realize that God sometimes won't take away our trials, but if we ask for His help, He will help us to get through them. And so from that moment, instead of praying to God to help Him get me out of the trial, I just asked for His help to get me through it, and I feel that He did, and I was still able to do the things that I was needing to do. The most extreme weather I experienced in Colombia was probably around 110 degrees Fahrenheit, just blistering hot in the day. I remember one time my companion and I, we were in Cucuta. We were walking up this huge hill to get to this lady's house, and we get there and we're sweating and it's hot and it's the middle of the day and we're so parched and so thirsty. We get to this lady's house and she's like, "Elders, would you like something to drink?" And we were like, we'd love to. So she starts preparing for us this lemonade. And she brings it out to us, and there's just this cold, fresh glass of lemonade, and I'm so excited to drink it. And I go to drink it, but I look inside and I realize something, and I realize that there are little ants just floating around in the lemonade, probably 10 or 15 ants just floating around. And so I look at my companion with kind of a shocked look on my face, and he looks back at me and he's like, "What do we do?" And I don't want to be drinking this. And so it's kind of funny, we told the sister that we were fasting and that we really couldn't drink it, and it killed us because we were so hot and we wanted to drink it so bad, but it was like, instead of lemonade, it was ant-aid. and so we couldn't, but it did get really hot there. Something that I learned on my mission was just to learn how to appreciate being grateful. I realized that the people there just live such humble lives. They don't have carpet, they don't have dishwashers, they don't have dryers, they don't have microwaves, they just cook on the stove, they don't have ovens. And it's just a really humbling experience to live there for 2 years and realize that we have it really good. And to realize that, you don't need all of these things to be happy. And so that was just an experience that taught me that you can be happy in any situation you're in. And it doesn't matter if you're going through a trial, or it doesn't matter if you're going through a hard time in your life. You can be happy no matter what. And you can find light in the dark, and you can find peace in the storm. And God sent us here to be happy, and so we should live in that way. In Colombia, when you're walking on the street, there's a lot of stray dogs everywhere. And sometimes they'll start barking at you, or they'll start chasing after you. But the dogs have been trained down there that if they start chasing after you, the only thing you have to do is bend down and pretend like you're picking up a rock. Because the dogs have been trained that they probably get rocks thrown at them all the time, and they're scared of that. So if they see that you're going down to the ground to pick up a rock, then they'll run away. So that's just something that I learned kind of about halfway through my mission, is that dogs will be scared of you if you look like you're going to throw a rock at them. So we were teaching a couple one time. Their name was Sonia and Ramiro. They lived in the city of Bogota, and they were pretty poor. They weren't married, but they had 2 little kids, and we started teaching them, and they were just completely receptive. They were the golden investigator, as you would say. They lived in really humble circumstances. In Colombia, they sell things on the streets, in little booths, little vendors. They'll sell, it's kind of funny, they'll sell cell phone minutes. They'll have these cell phones attached to chains attached to their booth, that people don't own phones in Colombia. So they'll go and they'll buy, a few minutes, and then the people will look at however minutes you called, and they'll charge you for those minutes. And they'll sell cell phone minutes and candies and natural juices and just all these different things in these booths. And so both Sonia and Ramiro, they worked in these little booths, and they didn't make very much money doing it, but we just saw how humble they were and how receptive they were to the gospel. And they received a lot of opposition right away. Sonia, when she was not having customers in her booth, she would just be sitting on the street reading her Book of Mormon in plain sight with people passing on every side. And she got a lot of opposition from that. She would have people yell at her saying that she was reading a book from the devil, and she would have other people telling her to come to their church, and why was she investigating this Mormon church? But they were extremely blessed from it. Ramiro, he we told them that, you know, they had to get married if they were to get baptized, and they really wanted to, but in Colombia marriages are really expensive and they're not very common, and so it's really hard for a couple to get married there. But they showed their faith, and Ramiro told us that one day he was walking down the street and he had found on the street he had found just the amount of money that they needed to get married. And it was a pretty big amount of money. It was probably like $60 or something that he found, which in Colombia is a lot of money. But he was able to find it, and they were able to go get married. And it was just a beautiful experience knowing that God will help us out in any situation that we're in. It doesn't matter how humble we are or what situation we live in. If we show faith to Him, He will bless us. And so we were able to get this couple married, and they were able to get baptized. And it was just beautiful seeing the faith that they showed and the blessings that they received from it. If you're going to Colombia, make sure to bring lots of clothes to be warm in. You'll get really hot, so pack light. But then also, if you're going to Bogota, make sure that you have to have an umbrella. And if you don't, they sell umbrellas basically on every street corner. But wear some kind of clothes that you're willing to get wet in, because you will get wet most likely wherever you go in Colombia. But yes, make sure to bring clothes that you'll be really hot in as well, because it gets hot there too. Colombia also has some interesting foods that you wouldn't have here in the States. I remember trying fried ants. So they had these big ants called hormigas culonas, which are like colony ants, which are just these massive, massive ants that are known for the specific part in Colombia. And I think that's the only part of the world where there are ants that big. But they fry up these ants, and then you eat them just like peanuts. And some people, kids and families will just eat these just like peanuts. And so I remember having one, and to me it didn't taste like a peanut. I mean, it just tasted kind of burned, and it tasted like a burned match, but I mean, they love it down there. I also remember having chicken gizzard, pasta, cow tongue, chicken feet, pig's feet. I had basically every part of the cow and of the chicken. They had this cow stomach soup that's called a mute, and it's actually really good. If you just kind of tell yourself, to not think about what you're eating, it is really good, because it's cow stomach soup. And if you look in, you'll just see these little pieces of meat with, I guess, little fibers or hairs coming out of it. But I mean, if you just get past that, it's a really good tasting soup. I know that my mission call was inspired of God, and I know that I was called to serve in Colombia for a reason. There were several times on my mission when I met people that I had never met before, but as soon as I met them, I just had this feeling like we somehow knew each other, or that we knew each other in the pre-earth life. And I'm not sure if that was, really true or anything, but I just felt that several times. But I did know that God had prepared me to go to Colombia, and God had prepared the people that I was to teach to receive the gospel. And I know that there was some kind of connection to the people that I taught there that I had with them in the pre-earth life. Whether we knew each other, whether we were friends, or whether we talked to God about meeting up when we were down here on earth. But I just had multiple experiences where I felt that was where I was supposed to be, in the exact place and the exact moment of my mission. There were times when I just wondered what my mission would have been like if I would have been there a couple months earlier or a couple months later, and I just think that it wouldn't have been right. So you being called on your mission, that is the exact moment that you have been called to go. And I know that God has called you to go there at that exact same time for a specific reason and purpose.